welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and this is the second installment of our Yarn Factory Listeners series. Now, this is it's still very new, obviously, with it only being the second one. But if you're just now learning about what Yarn Factory Listeners is, it's an event that was birthed by Bill Yohnka, where once a month he gets together 6 storytellers throughout the Kankakee area in one room at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee in the basement of the Majestic. And each person comes up, tells a story in about 8 minutes. And these stories are mostly personal, real-life stories. Some of them are about the person themselves. Some of them are about people they know or people they encountered over the years, or just a certain situation that happened to them. And so this is something Bill started in April of 2024. Happens the second Tuesday of every month at Flanagan's Irish Pub. And obviously this is the second one. It was recorded on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. And I was honored to actually tell a story this time as part of one of the storytellers. I was very flattered and honored to be able to do so. I told a story about how I used to hate Kankakee County. And then another storyteller you're going to hear from on this episode is Julia McDonald. She told a story about her father, who was actually a semi-famous cartoonist, but kind of on the risque side, if you know what I'm saying, adult cartoonist, more or less. So just so you know, this episode does contain some adult content. So FYI, if you're going to listen to this episode with kids around, I would suggest not doing that. It doesn't get like super dirty or anything like that, but it's still adult-oriented content, just so you know, for Julia's story. And then another storyteller is Miss Keys, or also known as Lakeisha Rivers. She talks about how she had a dream about becoming a storyteller. And then Frances McKern, who is actually Bill Yohnka's cousin from Chicago. She tells this hilarious but kind of scary story that happened to her back in 2008 when she was working at one of the cafes at a Barnes & Noble in Chicago, and how she had to get home by walking instead of taking a bus or a taxi or the L subway, etc., because she had no cash on her. Talks about how someone offered her a ride and she took it, and that turned out to be a very interesting and hilarious story, and like I said, a little scary. Another storyteller is Alicia Kleinert. She tells how a band director from her high school days at Kankakee High School actually held her accountable, and how that shaped her life and actually how she parents her children. It's all about how she became a trumpet player. It's actually a really great story. It was one of my favorites that night. And then we have Moran Beasley, who tells the story about how your name, your first name, or even your last name, really shapes your character. And so he kind of walks us through how his first name, Moran, shaped his life and shaped his character. It's a very touching story. And last but not least, Bill Yohnka surprised us. I had no idea he was going to get up and tell a story. It just kind of happened, and I was happy that he did. The story that Bill told or tells on this episode is actually, if you listen to Bill Yohnka's episode of Kankakee Podcast, he does talk about this, but he tells the story in much more depth and detail, I feel like, on this episode. And it's about how him and his father dug the graves of their family members as a way to cope with the loss of them. So, and it's a very interesting perspective, as you know. If you know Bill in any way, shape, or form, you know he is very good at telling stories or just explaining things. So those are all the storytellers that you are going to hear on the second installment of Yarn Factory Listeners, recorded May 14th, 2024 at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee. Let's give it a listen.
It has to sound strange to a business owner when they say, so we're just going to come and we're going to tell stories. So that's kind of what usually happens out in a bar like this anyway. But what makes this different is that right there, that thing that just happened where you were completely silent. And you don't have to stay silent the entire time because we want you to react naturally to the stories that happen. But we ask for your full attention. So we'd ask that, I know you're intrigued with the White Sox game. They got a chance of winning this one, but we're going to turn the game off. We're going to turn, if you've got a device in your pocket, you just silence that. It's fine. You'll get back to it later. And we'll just take a moment to just be in the presence of someone telling a story. And how often does that happen, that we get to tell a story exactly how we want to tell it? Because there's always someone we're telling it to who's waiting for their turn to talk. They've got something to say, right? Well, in this environment, the people who have planned stories tonight have a way they want you to experience their story. So we're going to give them that and just give all our attention to every detail that they've thought about telling you in their story tonight. So thanks for understanding that. And this is going to be it's going to be an enjoyable evening. I'm really excited to hear from each of our storytellers tonight. And we have a program. If you didn't get a program, we have more. We'll get you more during the breaks. But I used to. I'd done this once. I used to read their thing. And I was like, well, you got it there. You can read that. But what I think is wonderful about this is when I first posted, I think, on Facebook that, hey, I want to do this thing. I've really been inspired by being part of storytelling events in the city. I want to try to do a thing like this we have right here. And the first person who sent me a message was Jake LaMore. And you may know Jake LaMore from his numerous radio personalities. Well, you're always the same personality on the radio, right? But you're not like you're different characters. You're always the same person. Yeah. Wake and Jake. My kids remind me that I'm not as cool as Wake and Jake. Wake and Jake is cooler. And now, of course, Kankakee Podcast, which is an outstanding job of putting the spotlight on so many different people in our community. And we want to give a big, warm welcome to our first storyteller, Jake LaMore.
Wow. Thank you, Bill. Hey, let's give Bill Yohnka a round of applause, because he's the guy that put this thing together and got the wheels a turning. I was just the guy that saw it and said, hey, I want to be a part of this because I think this is really cool, and I think it really ties in well with Kankakee Podcast. So the story I'm going to tell tonight, and I want to share this, I just want to be completely honest. I did not rehearse this story whatsoever. And I'm just as nervous as all the other storytellers here tonight. So I want you to know I'm in the same boat with you. So I hope that makes you feel better when you come up here and you tell your story. So I'm going to call this story, I Used to Hate Kankakee County. That's what we're going to call this story. It's a true story. So growing up here in Kankakee County, I've lived here all my life. My family's been here for generations as well. And history has always been a big fascination for me. And as a young kid, I would go over to, whether it was my Grandma Lamore's house or the Weber's house on my mom's side of the family, I would find their local history books. And I'd start thumbing through them. And if you're like me, you see those old photographs of downtown Manteno or Kankakee or Bradley, wherever it is in our county. you see the old-fashioned cars, and you see the even further back the carriage and horses, and you're just like, wow, this is so cool. And then you learn about the factories that were here, like Roper and David Bradley and all of that. And of course, your grandparents are older, so there's a good chance they were there, or maybe their grandparents were there, or parents were around. So you start asking them questions about the history, and they get so excited to tell you this history of Kankakee County. And they're like, oh, yeah, we had this. And, your grandpa worked at Roper's and, and all that. And then you ask, well, what happened to these things? Why don't we have them anymore? And they go, they just, Kankakee is just not a good place to live anymore. It's dangerous, and there's no jobs. They all left. They all moved, and all the jobs went down south, and then they went to China, and you get that whole story. And you never want to go to the east side of Kankakee. No. It's too dangerous over there. Things like that. And eventually, being a young child, these things, they leave an impression on you, right? And you start to kind of take on those visions as well as a young child. And I started to kind of see, oh, we had all these cool things, and we don't have them anymore. They're gone. And we just have this nothing of a town, an area to live in anymore. And that's kind of how I took that. And it wasn't just my elders and my family. It was also their acquaintances and their friends and other people I would meet along the way. And so that stuck with me as I began to get older. And by the time I became a teenager and then into my 20s, that's what I saw. I just saw that this place was a has-been, and I need to get out as quickly as possible. I need to get out of here. I wanted to move to Chicago or somewhere that was cool. I just hated the people here, and I hated the area. I thought everyone was just small-minded. I was so angry about this. I used to play in a pop punk band, and I was so angry about being in this area. I even wrote a song about how much I hated the town. And it's so funny to sit back now. And there are people from that past life that I had that know that about me. And when they saw that I was starting to do Kankakee Podcast and say, oh, I love this community and all this and that, they're like, no, you don't. You don't like this community. You hate it. You wrote a song about it. So I'm going to share with you just some lyrics from that song. And we'll see if you laugh. You might not. This song is available on all the streaming platforms still. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. So if you look up, the song is called Strike a Match. That's the name of the song. And it's by The Projection. So if you decide, you want to listen to the song after this, if you're curious, it's a really great song. It's really well produced and everything. We paid lots of money to have that song well produced, but the song opens with, "Watch this city burn and fall to the ground. There's nothing here for me, nobody worthwhile around. I'm so sick of this small-minded town." And that was the first verse. The chorus goes, "I'll strike that match and send us straight to hell. There's no coming back, no one to tell. take my hand. We're getting out of here. So that just kind of sets up just how much I was not in love with Kankakee County. Now, I wrote that song probably about 12 years ago. And at that time, I was just getting into local radio. And I started to kind of see those gems here in our community. I still didn't like the area. I still wanted out. Don't get me wrong. But, working on River Country and the Valley and WFAV, I got to meet all these different people from the community, and I got to have these short interviews with them on my shows that I would host. And I started to see things a little differently, but I still wanted out. So 2016 rolls around. My serious girlfriend that I had at the time, we had been living together, and we had just broken up. And, this is the time where I was like, okay, I don't have any strings left here anymore. I can go move up the radio ladder and move around the country and become this big shot in radio, and pursue that dream. And I moved everything out of the apartment that we had together, except for one piece of furniture. And so that day comes when it's time for me to move that piece of furniture. I rented a U-Haul to get that. And I get a text message from my ex-girlfriend. And she says, "I'm pregnant." And I thought to myself, well, I guess I'm not going anywhere. And I knew that because I knew that she wanted to stay here. I knew she did not want to move away from her family. Whether, we stayed together and we tried to work things out as, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or whether we just co-parented, which we do very well to this day. I'm very thankful for. Whether either one of those options, I did not want, obviously, to live away from my child. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to make the best of being here. So that's when I really started to open my eyes and see that whatever I had whipped up in my head about this county was not correct. It was not how this county truly is. Yes, we have a rich history, but there are so many people in our community that do so many great things, and they're trying to build this community up. And they have been. There's people that have been doing that. So I feel like when I think about this story and I'm sharing it with you, I think it's okay, obviously, not to like a certain town or like a certain area, but I don't think it's okay to pass that along to someone else, especially the young generation. If you don't like where you live, you should move. If you don't like Kankakee, you should move and find a place where you can spread your wings and say, oh, I love this county. And that's okay. Like, not everyone has to love Kankakee County, but there's just something about living in the town you live in and just talking nothing but bad things about it, but yet you're still here, you still live here, and you don't do anything about it, about these bad things. So that's my story. I hope you liked it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jake. We're glad you're here. Talk about turning a corner. Wow. I did not know about that song. I don't vet these things. We just invite people up. Our next storyteller, so excited to have her here. Julia McDonald I get more compliments on one picture of mine that is not even a real picture of me. It is a drawing of me as a piece of broccoli. I love this. Yeah. So if Julia is usually going to be at the farmer's market looking for vegetables or drawing them. And we're just so happy to have Julia here to share a story with us today. Let's give her a big round of applause.
I get to follow 2 radio guys. Perfect. Okay, are there no children? Okay, good. Okay. Oh, shoot. Okay, it'll be okay. All right, so can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I might step away. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right, so page 32, how to draw a wonder bimbo. Number 1, the essential character of the female form is roundness. So begin with the roundest parts. Okay. Okay. Extended sternum line accentuates the arch of the body. Oval gives belly shape and helps indicate the tilt of the pelvis, which in turn emphasizes the thrust of the girly tush. Okay, all feminine fashions accentuate the figure, so begin by concentrating on the body, okay? Inflate the right knocker until it seems equal in volume to the left, so I'll do that. Pretty good. Because we don't want to neglect women's rights, now do we? Number 3, begin adding details, facial and otherwise. You might even be tempted to decorate with a little booby fruit, and the author and artist does that. Okay, just for fun. After all, once you get a girl naked, you might as well have some fun. Boobs are soft, as well as round. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna add a leg in there. And then just doing this really quick. Okay, obviously.
Kohlrabi.
Oh, thank you. Okay, there's also, should we do a head? Might as well do a head in here. Okay. I mean, doesn't matter. Like that. And then, woo, hair. She does have arms, and they go down like that. Something like that. Any questions? Okay. So one question might be, what am I reading from? So the title of this book is called Not Just Another Pretty Face, The Confessions and Confections of a Girly Cartoonist, written and drawn by R.C. Harvey, who is my father. Yes. Gosh, I did not expect that there would be a little lull for the applause. Okay. I didn't add that into the timing. Okay, so what's a girly cartoonist? That's a pretty obsolete thing nowadays, hopefully. But my dad was born in 1937. In the olden times, there were cartoonists would make a couple extra bucks. They'd buy a gag from a gag writer. They illustrate this silly gag with a naked lady, and they'd try to shop it around to men's magazines like Playboy. And my dad did a little bit of that. How did I end up with this? When I was in my 20s, I got interested, not in anything like this, but I got interested in my father actually as a person, which was new for me. And I realized that he actually was kind of famous in the cartooning community. he wrote a lot of he wrote a biography or two of a couple of famous cartoonists. He wrote history of the comic strip and the newspaper funnies. So I thought, well, what else did he write? I went online. I thought, you know what? I have never seen this book around the house. So I was like, you know what? This might be like, it's probably a collection of essays on the evolution of the pinup, which is a pretty, I like Betty Page. So I got the book, I ordered it, and it shows up, and it is not a collection of essays on the evolution of the pinup. It's really hard to look at for a daughter, and to this day, but so a lot of those kind of girly cartoons, one panel, like a skinny hairy guy having buoyant sex where there's air and then in one panel, and then maybe the wife will walk in and there's some silly pun, and there's a lot of those really cringy panels. There's a strip called The Prince of Poon, and there's a strip called Lida's Ugly Duck, and the duck is actually a swan, and who is her lover. There actually are essays in here in defense of girly cartoons and the use of stereotype and sexual objectification of women, but it's mostly sexual objectification of women. It's mostly this woman here. She's the version of she is his idea of a woman, I guess. So there's actually two types that show up. So sex pot, and then whiteboard number 2, please. So there's sex pot, and then this is going to be more just me drawing what I think. Okay, sex pot, and then glasses. Glasses, bangs, hair. She's kind of mad, a little bit mad. She does not have a lot of boobs. And she's, kind of dowdy, or sometimes she's sort of dressed up in a suit, or an academic kind of thing, but then she's just sort of mad. Okay, so we have the sex pot over there. Does anyone have any guesses about so that's the stereotype, the sex pot. This is the stereotype of kinda, yeah. Keep going. The feminist. Yes. She is a bummer. She is such a Debbie Downer, and she'll show up in an orgy naked, but she'll say something really smart with her glasses, and then just bomb everybody out. So she's the villain of the cartooning world in my dad's eyes. So it's just a lot. It's just so what's my point? I guess my point is it's actually not, don't buy this dirty book. It's actually, I think you should buy this dirty book. It's actually really good. The drawings are way better than mine. It's as if the man spent his entire life teaching himself how to draw cartoons, which he did. And I love the way my dad puts words together. So even though I don't really agree or like his arguments, I actually really like the way he writes. So this is one of my prized possessions now. I have 3 copies. And maybe that's the point, actually, of the story. So if I had just picked this book up from some random book sale or something, and I flipped through it, would I want to know this guy? Probably not. I probably wouldn't. But I do know this guy quite well. And he died a couple years ago. He's still, and is someone I aspire to be. He's a hero of mine. He lived life with a love of life that not very many people have, seeking wonderment and joy and curious about everything. Loved to draw, loved to write about drawing, loved to write about other people drawing. And it's not like this was a secret, okay? It was not a dark passenger that I discovered after he died. It was well integrated into our family culture at the time of his death. So his girly cartooning was out there. In fact, there's a multi-panel strip in here framed on the wall in our family room growing up. In retrospect, it was confusing, but it was there. And then, later in life, my mom, who obviously didn't really love this, my mom and my sister didn't really love this. We'd go to Comic-Cons and sell all of his books, including this one. We'd like his Facebook posts until it got banned from Facebook 3 times. And, we didn't love this, but we loved him. And this is a part of him. So that's the point. And I wanted to end today with just his words. So again, I love his writing. He does admit that this is not a particularly noble thing to do. He acknowledges the other arguments. But he says, we need the nobler vision, no question. But we need to see ourselves as we are too. And mayhap fools with their motley caps and bells and their parades of stereotypes, like his characters, can help us to a perspective where both views are possible. In the hopeful meantime, let us not dim the only glimmer of light on this darkling plain. Why make ourselves all the more miserable by stilling the laughter? For the occasional relief from the grim business of living in an imperfect world that laughter affords us, we need as many sources of humor as possible. More, not fewer. Even girly cartoons with their sexual stereotypes. Even when they sometimes fail to be funny, they carry on with the crusade, nonetheless.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. We'll take a quick break after our next storyteller. And I love that Lakeisha Rivers, Miss Keys, as she's known, got into storytelling because it came to her in a dream. Isn't that wonderful? It was a dream that you should be doing this. And every once in a while, our dreams become something that we do in real life. So let's welcome Miss Keys to the stage.
Good evening. My name is Miss Keys. I open door through storytelling, for storytelling, and keeping the story alive. My job is to engage with the audience, share a story, and learn a lesson. So today's story is the story, Why Not Me? Well, I usually look up the term of each word I just said. So let's start with the word why. I looked in the English dictionary and it said something positive, uplifting, motivating, happy towards something. So I had to think back. I remember growing in a wonderful home with 2 parents that worked. They encouraged us to do our homework, to be positive, to be kind to kids, just to live life. I remember going to school, trying to behave. I remember trying to listen to the rules at the job, but I got fired at a few. That's okay. I learned to get along with people, do unconditional love, do good things. But let's go to the second word, not. That means negative. Of course, negative. What happened in my life that was negative? Like I said, I was supposed to listen at home, but I was the trouble child. I like to talk back, and I got a bad attitude because people didn't know I was bullied, teased, picked on, molested, raped, hurt. I even tried to disfigure myself. That's why I have makeup on, because I have scars when I tried to cut myself, because I had depression, anxiety, all those bad things they say you have as a kid. I still was negative because I went to school with a bad attitude because I thought I was the tough kid. I still had an attitude on the job because people didn't understand me. They didn't want to hear me. They didn't want to listen to me. They thought I was weird. I still had a bad attitude when I was in relationships that weren't for me. But I got pregnant. That's okay. The worst thing I remember is I'm not supposed to be negative. When they told me my dad's cancer was going to stay in remission, but I have to call hospice now. So now I got another attitude. Now I'm drinking, I'm smoking. I don't give a damn about nobody. I'm just doing me. I had to learn that this was going to end soon with my father. So now I really got a bad attitude. What else negative can happen in my life? As the story continues, I also found out that I'm sick. Like, damn, can I get a break? So my cousin said, cuz, you don't look well. You look kind of sick. I think you need to go to the ER. So I went to the ER. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Damn, here we go again. You know, Miss Rivers, I need to talk to you. We're not going to let you out the hospital tonight. What do you mean you're not going to let me out the hospital? I want to go home. I don't want to be here. No. We need you to stay here because we got to run tests. What you mean you got to run tests? You have a irregular heartbeat. Damn, that's negative. What else can we go through? We got the positive, we got the negative. The last word is me. So how could I encourage myself when I'm supposed to be so positive, but I got all these negatives and the negatives are not equal to the positive and the positive keeps going to the negative? I don't know what else to do. So one night I had a dream and I laid in the bed and I kid you not, if you was there, you'd be scared too. I woke up and said, excuse me, you want me to do what? Me? The weird kid, the one that nobody liked, you want me to do what, God? A storyteller. Oh my God. No, for real. He wanted me. He said in my ear, Miss Keys, Miss Keisha, I want you to share people's stories. You are a storyteller. People need to listen to you. I said, but I was the kid nobody wanted to talk to. I was the girl that nobody loved. I was the one who didn't give a damn. Wait. Let me follow instructions. So you mean to tell me I got to get up every day and listen to people's stories, no matter if it's good, bad, negative, ugly. True story. Today, a lady shared her story. You know, it's Mental Health Month. And I remember seeing her around town. Here we go with the storytelling. All I was doing was trying to get some gas because the light was on E. The light was on E. But she filled me up with her story. She said, yeah, I remember you at the daycare. I remember our kids going to the same daycare. Sure. So how's your daughter? Oh, I had to put her in a group home. You had to do what? For 20 minutes, she shared her story. It melted my heart. So I knew this is the right gift I'm supposed to be doing because she shared something intimate. When people talk to me, it's intimate. The positive, the negative, the good, the ugly, the bad. So why not me? Why not me? I'm supposed to encourage people, even myself. As your storyteller, remember to share your story. Never give up. Don't quit. You got a purpose. I know everybody in this room has a purpose because you're still here. Please share your story. Why not me? I'm your girl, Miss Keys, opening the doors through storytelling, for storytelling, keeping the story alive. You can check me out on my Facebook page, Lakeisha Rivers. I do lives on Wednesday, and thank you for being my storytellers.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. Let's give her another big round of applause. Miss Keith, thank you. And I don't know why I'm looking at this. Our next storyteller is not on there. Our next storyteller is actually me. So my father, my head would have you think that he'd figured out like a way to skip part of the grieving when you lose a loved one. Like you could think of like a cheat code. Like you could skip a level, right? With a video game. Except this is the worst video game ever. Grieving is not a good video game. And the part he wanted to skip was the living rooms and the kitchen and dining room table with the weepy aunts and cousins. And he'd even say to me, he's like, well, Bill, you don't want to linger here anyway. You don't want to be around this, do you? I was like, no, I didn't want to be around that. And I don't want to make him seem like heartless, but just, you didn't want to be around that. And his way of skipping that, his cheat code, we decided that we were going to dig the grave ourselves. And I realized this isn't a cheat code every family can use because my father grew up, his father was the superintendent of Catholic cemeteries. So he grew up digging graves. And as a kid, digging graves, and then as an older young adult home from college would be called to help dig graves. So it wasn't a big deal then when he called the guy who was then now in charge of the cemetery in Shabance, Illinois, and said, you know what? We're just going to do it ourselves. and that's what we did when my grandfather and then when my grandmother passed a few years later, packed up the truck in the morning and went and dug the grave ourselves. And it didn't take long to realize, like, he might be onto something here. Like, it's a unique experience to have your morning cup of coffee and to set it on a neighboring headstone. And it didn't take long before the sun started to get higher in the sky. And we're digging, and the dirt's in the air, and it's hot. And the dirt mixing with the sweat, and it'd have little drips, muddy drips dripping down my glasses. But, I never remembered anyone crying. There was never any tears. It was just, it felt like work. And it's like, we're onto something here. And I don't know if people realize, this is a question that always comes up. I don't know if they're 6 feet deep. We didn't measure them. What we did have is my grandfather, he had a shovel, a long-handled shovel, and on the top of that shovel, he made a little notch. And that's how we knew how deep to go. When that went down, that was deep enough. And that was the only part that was a little bit morbid. That a tool that he used for him and his crew, so they didn't make one too shallow, but that he had that notch on there for a reason, and then we used it for his grave. But as we took turns digging and wheeling the dirt away, I got to thinking there is really, I don't know if you realize this, there's really an art to digging graves. And I didn't appreciate it till I did it with my father and I'm not saying he's the best. There's people who've dug way more graves than him. But amazingly able to keep the lines so straight and square. And then when you dig down further, to keep all those angles perfectly square so that when the burial vault goes down, there's never any interruption. It can go straight down all the way to the bottom. And it's like a craftsman, really. There's a sculpting to it. And I think about the people who have those people in their family who are, they're carpenters. There's people who are just really talented. And you can drive through our town and you can look at a house and say, somebody in my family built that. You look at a piece of furniture and say, somebody in my family did that. And I can drive by some cemeteries and I look, you can look out there and think, oh, those are some good holes. There's everything just straight and the angles are good and it went all the way down and dug by people who they were the only ones to ever see it. and then filled it back in. So we had this whole experience, and we were never at a loss for things to talk about as we were out there. I remember doing this with my father, who covered stock car racing in Kankakee for decades, and my uncle, who was the mayor of Shabance at the time, and also a former race car driver, Eldon Dubuque, and which is the best name ever, isn't it? Eldon Dubuque. I couldn't have made that up. And I'm the racetrack announcer at the Kankakee County Speedway still to this day. And we have this kind of way of talking to each other about stuff, just about cars, about the racetrack. And there was some frustration that, my grandparents both passed away after living years in a nursing home. And we talked about, in terms of cars, like the cars we saw on the track that were so powerful, so nimble. And then as they aged after the years, the frames were twisted and bent and then straightened out again, and twisted and bent and straight out again, and to a point where the motors were sputtering and missing beats, and they really couldn't be recognized as who they used to be. And we thought it was sad how these cars that we remembered being great, at 1 year, they were just going to be done. And it was, not going to be any fanfare about it. There was just going to be over. And they'd be out, not inside the shop during the wintertime. They wouldn't be in a garage. They'd just sit out in the weeds. And then the next spring, when racing started again, the weeds would grow through those tires, and the flat, rotted tires would just be out there in the elements. And we talk about that, but my dad, he preferred a different kind of story. He preferred telling the story of Jim O'Connor, who in the 1970s was a reigning king of the Illinois dirt tracks. And he would change the whole tone really well. And so Jim O'Connor, he had this motor built one year in Champaign. And the way my dad talked about it was like some kind of epic thing. But if you went to Champaign, you went to a certain guy, you got a motor made that was like a time bomb, because it was eventually going to blow. But in the meantime, it was going to do things that Detroit engineers never recommended. It was going to produce power like no one had ever seen. And there were some magical moments that season. There were so many checkered flags that he wove waving out his window. And he was this big, strong man, like an all-pro defensive end. And you had to be big and strong like that to manhandle a Camaro around the dirt track. And my dad would get in the mode where he could picture it. You could see him watching that car again with a number 8 on the door. And he talked about how it sounded, and how that motor from Champaign, the combination of all of it, just worked so well. And the motor sounded like nothing else. Did you know that the Rolling Stones song, Sympathy for the Devil, you know that one? And that's the way O'Connor's car sounded. Now, you have the rest of the cars and they're all the background singers. Hoo, 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 hoo. They're all in unison, and all the other instruments are going along. And then there's this guitar that comes out of nowhere. Unlike anything else on the track, it's loud, it's exciting, it's dangerous. And just when you think it couldn't get any do-do-do-do-do-do-do, it goes and just, and it's over. And all he could do was just coast off the track and get out of harm's way. It didn't miss a beat. There was no sputtering. It was just done. And for as much as it was a disappointment, everyone knew that you knew this wasn't going to last. Some things just weren't meant to last like that. And even the old pit guys could just like shrug their shoulders and just kind of repeat the old racing refrain. They're like, oh, she was going like hell when she went. And there was really nothing to be sad about. And I've realized that there are chapters in our life that are like that. There are friendships that are like that, relationships that are like that. Sex has been like that. There's been lots of things that have been like that in this world. And I think sometimes there are people who are like that, who live with this incredible purpose, this incredible passion, this incredible joy, and it's just not meant to go on forever. We didn't talk about it all that much that day, but I think we kind of realized as we helped the last digger out of the hole, as we finished the last beer, I think we realized that would be an okay way for it to happen. And on those digging days, it is a unique bond between grave diggers. We don't get to do this with people. So when I see somebody who is there, it's like, oh man, we have this bond, and it's just a unique thing. But also on those days, I didn't really want to think about it. But it was in the back of my mind that one day I'd be doing this without him. And I really do. While he slowed down in his last few years, I really like to think of him going out like a dirt track Camaro. And that there's no sputtering, just coasting off the track. And luckily, they were able to use all sorts of parts when his heart went out. He was just 67. And on that digging day, there was so many people there. There's a bigger crew. So many of us looking for that cheat code to this incredibly boring video game. And I don't think we found it. But I do know that those lines were all really straight. The angles were so square all the way down. And I realized, too, it wasn't about escaping the weepy cousins and aunts, some of them who are here. We love them, too. But it was about this. It was about having a story. It was about having an experience. And it was about creating this odd piece of art that nobody ever sees. Thanks. Our next storyteller is actually one of those weepy cousins. Fran McKern, Frances, is actually my cousin. She lives in Chicago, and she, studied. What do you study? You studied art and stuff. You can read about her in here. And then she realized her real passion was paying bills, so she quit doing improv and stuff like that until today. But I think she's really phenomenal, and she's one of my favorite people in the entire world. And she's saying, stop now. And we want to welcome to the stage Frances McKern.
Thank you very much. So now when I bomb telling this story, I get to blame it on Bill, telling a really sad story right before mine. Thank you. All right, so my name is Frances, and I turned 36 this year, and that means two things. One, I've been an adult exactly as long as I was a child. That's math. And the other is that, for marketing purposes, my opinion no longer matters. But what it means is I'm a double adult, and it's now my responsibility to pass on my knowledge and expertise through misadventures to the youth. So this is mostly directed to people under 36. If you are not under 36, bust out your phone, play a game, I don't know. Or you could hang on to this information and pass it on to a young person. All right. I don't usually tell stories like this either, so I'm going to start off my story in the style of one of my idols, Sophia Petrillo. Picture it, Chicago, 2008. I was 20 years old and working at Barnes & Noble in the cafe. I was closing on the day of this particular story, and we closed at 11, which means that by the time I was done wrapping up the cafe, it was near midnight by the time I got out of the building. It was pouring down rain, and I did not have any money on my CTA fare card. I also did not have any cash. This was 2008, which was a really weird year for technology, okay? So the iPhone had come out recently. You could download songs directly to your phone, but if you wanted to get on a bus, you better have cash, all right? It was a weird time. But I was young. I was, sturdy, hardy, firm, and I decided that I was going to brave the elements and walk the 15 blocks from my work to home. And it started out great. I decided to take Fullerton Avenue, which is a big street in Chicago. It's big enough to have its own red line station. So better luck next time, Armitage. Okay, that would have done better in Chicago, but that was pretty good. So I was walking down Fullerton, brightly lit. I was, there's a college, lots of young people nearby. I felt safe, and I was walking past, we got into more of an industrial part of the street, and there was a big U-Haul warehouse on one side. And I said to myself, that's a place where you'd find a body. And it occurred to me that maybe this walking home idea wasn't as safe as I had thought it was originally. And as soon as that's occurring to me, a black Lincoln Town car pulls up on the street next to me, and the man driving it asks if I want to ride. Now, how many of you, just a quick show of hands, like you're at a restaurant, you're looking at people and you make up a story about them, right? Like you're watching an older man and a younger woman have a meal together and you're like, ooh, father-daughter. May-December relationship. You don't know, you make up a story. My brain does that for me unbidden, right? With no intervention from my actual conscious. And then it delivers that story to me as the truth. So I looked at this black Lincoln Town car pull up and I said, oh, it's an off-duty chauffeur who is kindly offering me, he's been doing this job all day. What's one more, he says. So he's asking me if I want to ride. Absolutely I do. I get in the back seat of the car. And at first, this is all, my story that I've told myself, it's all holding up. He says, I just got off work. I'm like, cool. Yeah, great. How about this weather? Oh man, chauffeurs talk about the weather, I bet. That all tracks. But then I start to get the feeling, hang on a second. This might not be a good situation that I'm in. He asked me why I got in the back seat. And I did not have an answer for him that was based in reality. So he suggested that I get in the front seat instead. We get to a red light. I get out of the car. That would have been a great time to get out of the car. Keep going. But I get in the front seat. And do you want to know why? He asked, and I didn't want to be rude. So now I'm in the front seat of the car. We've driven maybe 4 blocks at this point, but traffic is bad. So, because it's raining, it's going pretty slow. But this is the first time I've gotten a real good look at his eyes. And glassy, distant, madness, manic. I start to panic at this point. Not that I'm worried that any, physical harm is going to come to me, because I have what's now known as big dog privileges. I was, when this story happened, I was maybe 30 pounds lighter, but I've always been a brick wall of a woman. Okay. So I'm not, I could take him. Okay. He was tiny, but he was driving the car and he was clearly intoxicated. So I'm like, how dare this man be driving drunk and then ask me to get in his car? I guess fault was on both sides, but so I'm thinking, you need to get out of this car, right? And so at this point in my life, I was 20 years old. My parents had already sunk about $5,000 into improvisation classes. So you think if there's one thing I could do, it's think on my feet. And I said, hey, you know what? There's a Dominic's up here, actually. Can you drop me off at this grocery store? That'd be great. And he says, what do you need from the grocery store? And I have any number of items that have a sense of urgency to them to choose from, right? What can you need from a grocery store at midnight? Tampons, pads, Drano. I could have gone another way. I could have, said a list of things to make him fear me. Rope, a tarp, no witnesses. But instead of doing that, he asked me, what do you need from the grocery store? Lettuce. Urgent need for lettuce at midnight. What do you need the lettuce for? Lunch tomorrow. I do a mix of iceberg and arugula. Once I got the lettuce out, a whole world built from, then I had all these salad needs that I conveyed to him as he was driving me to the grocery store. And I got out, I went into the vestibule. I stood there and I watched him do a lap around the parking lot and then drive away. And I stood there between the Hawaiian rolls and the Zapp's Voodoo Hot Chips. And I thought, you brilliant. You can talk your way out of anything. And I left the grocery store. I went and I waited at the bus stop. The bus came and I got on and I asked him, I was like, listen, it's raining. I don't have any money. Can you please just get me home? And he's like, yeah, sure, fine. The next day, I go to another shift at Barnes & Noble. And this time after I close, I get a ride with a couple of other cafe girls up north with the manager that all of the girls in the cafe had a crush on. Okay. And 2 of them were from Kankakee. So they had good taste. Tied it in, brought it together. So we're driving. He's driving us home. And I'm telling this story of what happened to me last night, much in the way that I'm telling you now. And perhaps Errol, the manager that we all had a crush on, he was, 40. He was wise himself. He didn't really like the tone that I was taking. He didn't like the risk that I had taken with my life. And he was so concerned about me that he pulled over the car that he was driving. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Frances, look at me. Never do that again. And that stuck with me, okay? That's good advice. So now that I am nearing the age he was when he told me that, I have advice for the youth of today. Never get in the back seat of a stranger's car. If they give you an opportunity to get out of that car, never get in the front seat. And if you are asked to think of anything at all to save you, do not say lettuce. And one last thing. If you find yourself in Chicago late at night when it's raining and you don't have any money, just ask the bus driver real nicely and he'll take you home.
Thank you, Frances. Let's give her another big round of applause. She's never doing that again. Neither should any of you. Our next storyteller, I love that in his bio he wrote, it's more about the other people in his life. He has lots of roles in our community. Allison's husband, Parker's dad, and also now the host of Open Book again, doing that again. That's great. And let's give a warm welcome to the stage to Moran Beasley.
Thank you. I did not memorize my piece. So on the count of 3, everybody go, you suck. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right. Everybody else comes up here and I just I'm going to read. Okay. Yes. So next month, Rubber Rose. It's actually Miss Kizumi co-hosting. It's not just me. So June 25th. Mark your calendars. Look appropriately on social media. Okay. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. Who knows what that's from? Very good. Well done. Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2. Actually was the source, but yes. An interpretation of this passage is that Shakespeare means that names themselves are a convention to distinguish things or people, but themselves do not have any worth or meaning. To examine this further, we shall look at a name. My name is Moran. I was named after my grandmother's maiden name. My mother named me herself. The name Moran is Irish Gaelic and means wandering sailor, as well as a host of other translations that I'm sure any drunkard in an Irish bar could argue with me about. But now, to give context, I was born in Lafayette, Indiana. Go Boilers! And I moved to Indianapolis at the age of 1.5, and I lived there till I was almost 9. When I was young, my name was not an issue. I was well liked. I had lots of friends. All kids mostly care about when they're that young is that you're fun to hang out with. I was fun to hang out with. All of that changed when we moved. Bum, bum, bum. When I was almost 9, my father got a job promotion that caused my family, to move to a suburb of Chicago. When we moved to Oak Park, the first thing I noticed was the kids' reactions to my name. Not only was I a stranger to these kids, but my name was funny sounding. Moran. Sounds like moron. That's a very common response. Thus, my new identity was born. Moran Beasley. Kids can be very cruel, but also very superficial, much like adults. This part of the story is not unusual. New kid moves to town, doesn't know anybody, but now my name hurt me more than helped me. I got picked on a lot. I did well in school, which of course did not make anything easier. I developed a stutter and took speech therapy sessions in the middle of the school day, which made my new identity that much worse. It also didn't help that I moved twice within Oak Park in the span of 2 years, from an apartment on the north side to a house on the south side. Switching from one school where I barely had any friends to another school before age 12 was hell, to put it mildly. After all, hardly anyone wants to hang out with a moron. Flash forward a few years. 1989, since everyone's giving years. I'm 14, and I'm having dinner with my parents and my sister. My mother says in a drunken slur, Moran, such a stupid name. Yes. Then she laughed. It was the laughing that got me. It was almost maniacal, like a comic book villain. I quickly replied, well, you named me that. She then retorted, without missing a beat, well, that was a stupid thing to do. And then she laughed some more. I quickly went to my room upstairs. My parents immediately blew up into an argument. My father was outraged that my mother would make fun of me. My mother defended herself by saying that I needed to develop a thicker skin. Her words exactly. Eventually, she ended up storming out of the house in a drunken rage. She came home later, but she never apologized for what she did. Not even to this day. I've brought it up to her, and she doesn't even remember it. I didn't cry that night, but I did start to envision swapping my first and my middle name. My middle name is Joseph. Joe Beasley. I was going to become when I turned 18. I smiled at the thought, and I went to sleep. Quick aside about my parents. My parents, his grandparents, are both addicts. My mother is an alcoholic, and my father is a workaholic. I can't say either are recovering because she never stopped drinking and he never stopped working. She just drinks less now and he works less now. but one condition led to the other. My father dedicated himself to the labor union cause and was promoted heavily, eventually after decades becoming president of his whole union. My mother was forced, her words, to basically be a single mom with 2 kids since my father was gone so much for work. Alcohol and tobacco were her chosen forms of escape. But I digress. My mother's drinking and my father's working are whole other stories full of sighs and tears. Now's the good part. High school was better for me. My mother was right, even in her drunken stupor. I had developed a thicker skin to my name. Whenever anybody made fun of my name at that point, I would just laugh and say, "How original!" sarcastically, and then I would walk away. The cliche is true, and this is good for all the kids as well. Bullies stop being bullies when they're ignored. I started getting friends that didn't care about my name. I eventually got a girlfriend. I started a band with some friends. So yeah, high school was better. But nothing prepared me for how my name was at college. Eastern Illinois University, go Panthers. Fall 1994. I introduced myself to my roommate and a few people in my dorm and on campus. The reaction to my name was surprising to me. Moran. Is that your first name? Did you make that up? That is so cool. I gotta tell you, I have never heard of my name sounding cool ever before in my life. It was invigorating. Another true cliche. College, you can truly create a new you. I was finally able to get a clean slate. I got very active in college, student groups especially. My name now helped me more than hurt me. I had lots of friends. I was pretty political back then, and eventually my name became known as one of the college progressive activists. There's even a photo of me in my college yearbook of me at a student council protest, putting tape over my mouth. I had overcome my stutter in high school, and I joined the debate team. My high school coach even helped me get a full ride scholarship at Eastern. I was one of the only people I knew, including my wife, that did not owe a single dime coming out of college. So happy ending after all. What started as a kid with a stutter and low self-image issues became a pretty decent husband of almost 24 years, a devoted father of almost 23 years, and a proud homeowner of almost 17 years. I've even learned to know and love my parents again. But I respectfully disagree with Sir Shakespeare. Like is said in the Marvel movie Shang-Chi, names are sacred. They connect us not only to ourselves, but for those that came before us. A name does mean something. A name builds identity. A name builds character. My name, in many, many ways, has shaped who I've become. But then my name is really just the beginning of my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moran. It sounds different to say it now. Like I never really thought about it before. Moran. Yeah. Wonderful. Let's give another round of applause, Moran. Thank you. Our final storyteller tonight is someone I haven't known that long. And when I met her, it's like, wow, this person is really passionate, really excited. has great ideas, is a great entrepreneur, is a fantastic mother. And how this happened is I was sitting at a bar, and somebody introduced me to people, and somebody was telling me about like a business idea, and like, oh, I'm looking for space for something. And I had, the only piece of paper I had was a list of the next storytellers, all the people who have already told stories tonight. I had written down in a list. And when I handed her the pen, she just added her name to the list. Literally. And so, and she had this energy. I'm like, I don't know. How's this sound? You're like, these are all people who are going to tell a story next month. You want to do it? She said, yeah, I can do that. I thought that was pretty amazing. It's like one of those moments where it's like, yeah, this has to just happen. Yeah, let's go with it. And you can read more about her on here. She's amazing in so many ways. Let's welcome to the stage Alicia Kleinert.
Wow. All of the storytellers were amazing, and I'm just sort of kind of shaking coming after you guys. So great job to you guys. So with my story, it's more of a sentimental, and so as you sort of age in life, you start to reflect back on different experiences that you had in your childhood. And so for me, there was a particular experience that I had in my childhood that I wanted to share with everybody. And so just to give you a little bit of background about me, I was born and raised here. I went through the Kankakee school system. I had a mom at the time who was really ill. And so for me, it was not having very much guidance and sort of being on my own, my brother and I, to sort of raise ourselves. My dad, he was in the home as well, but he was a worker to sort of providing for the home. And so he was a truck driver out on the road most of the time. And so for me, I was a pretty outgoing kid, very extroverted. I was always at somebody's house. I had lots of friends. And so for me, it was all about what's the next thing I can get into. And when I was in 5th grade, it was band. I figured I wanted to try it out. The Kankakee High School threw a concert every year for the elementary kids to recruit them to band. And so it was that one concert that sort of sparked my interest, and I went after it. I picked the trumpet. And so for me, it was something that I had no idea about, but I was so inquisitive about it at the same time. And so it was a few weeks before 5th grade. I got the call. I went to King Music, picked up my trumpet. And so I don't think I got home before the trumpet was out of its case, and I'm playing in the back seat in my mom's ear. And so over like the next couple of weeks before school, I just sparked this interest in it. I played day and night with this trumpet. And my mom had been sick. She was in the hospital. She was discharged home. And I wanted to do something for her. So here I'm thinking, I know all of the tones and knew how to play. Didn't know how to read a note, sheet music. I didn't know any of the notes. So I asked her, I'm like, what do you want me to play for you? And for her, she was sort of bedridden. So she watched TV a lot. And she said the Montel Williams theme song. At that time, it was Montel Williams and the Ricky Lake Show that she loved. And so I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. I'm going to do this. So I put in the tape when we had the VCR. I pressed the record, recorded the TV theme song, and went in my room all day. So without knowing a note or how to read music, I sort of played and learned by ear. And so it was that evening, I ran out of my room. I told my mom, hey, I've learned this. Are you ready to listen to it? And so I pressed play, and here I'm just tooting away on this horn, making up notes just to, make it sound like the Montel Williams theme song. And her face was so bright. She smiled so hard, and she just gave me just so many compliments. Just to see her child go after something, I think that's what gave her joy after being out of the hospital. So, fast forward the next 5 years, I mastered that trumpet. I got into various solos. I was in jazz band, played concert band. Fast forward to high school, I got into marching band. So marching band was everything. A week before school started, you had to go for band camp. And so for me, band camp was everything, but it was also mandatory. So before my sophomore year, I had a party I wanted to go to. So I was that kid that didn't have a curfew. I went and, came and go as I pleased. My mom was sick, so she really didn't have the full reins on us as kids. And so I wanted to go to this party. And my band director, said it loud and clear, you have to be there or else. And so for me, that was not an acceptable answer because I wanted to be at this party. And so for me, I asked him, I was honest with him. I told him, I wanted to go to this party. He said, absolutely not. I'm leaving a few hours early. What does it matter? I'll be back in the morning. And so we went back and forth. I ended up leaving. So he told me if I left that I'm done with the band altogether. And so I called his bluff and I left. Went to the party. It was not a good party. The food was terrible. The music was terrible. And all of the boys that were supposed to be there was not there. So I was upset. So instead, I said, I started to regret that decision. I went home that night. And the next morning I said, you know what? I'm going to go to band camp. He's not going to kick me out. It's going to be okay. Went to band camp, started, getting my instrument out, ready to go, talking to my friends. He rolls in, he sees me, he locks eyes with me. He said, what are you doing here? And to me, I said, I apologize. I shouldn't have made that decision yesterday. Just please let me stay. He said, you made your decision. You need to go. You are no longer a part of this band. And for me, I was devastated. I was embarrassed. I was sad. But I was mostly pissed off because I always got my way. If I wanted something, I got it. And so it was the first time that I didn't get my way. And so that really sort of put me in a spiral downhill. So my sophomore year, first day of school, I didn't show up. The whole month of August, I didn't show up. It was the middle of September that I got a call from truancy and also from the school. My parents had to go up to the school. We had to have a meeting. I found out that I was unenrolled from high school and I was enrolled into an ulterior program for kids, and found out very quickly that that wasn't the place for me. It was filled with kids who had been in jail, who were teen parents, who were drug addicts. And so for me, that was a completely different world for me. And so I had lost all my friends at this point. And so I went into myself and figured out what I needed to do. And that trumpet was there. So I played every day, morning, noon, and night, just to figure out how I was going to come back from this. And so I eventually did. I got all of the credits that I needed to finish my sophomore year there. And then I applied back to high school, got accepted, and then also got back into the band. So that for me, it was something that I had to take on my own. I was always looking for someone to sort of rescue me and get me out of these spots that I put myself in, and figured out that very quickly that was something that I needed to do for myself. And so my junior year started. I had to audition for chairs. And so I got an audition piece from the band director. And so for me, I was bad at words. I was bad at apologies. And I wanted him to really understand how I felt and the lessons that I learned in that prior year. And so for me, I took that audition piece and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. I created vibratos, which is basically notes that you can sort of, take and run with them and put emotion into them. And so the day came I needed to audition. I went into a room. There was a black chair, a tape recorder, and just myself and my instrument. And I really poured my heart and soul into that audition piece. And a couple of days later, I found out that I made second chair out of 14 trumpets, just going back. For me, it was my way of apologizing to my band director for A, being disrespectful, and B, making the decision to walk out on something I was so passionate about. And also just to show him that I hadn't given up on this instrument. And so we ended up having a conversation about that. He told me it was one of the best audition pieces that he heard. And where did I get this vibrato from? And so, I told them it was just my experiences from last year. And I was really, really sorry for everything that I had, put myself through, but also him. And so for me, I think that was one of the pivotal moments that I sort of recently realized that my band director was one of the first adults in my life to hold me accountable for something and to stick to the consequences and allow me to feel those consequences. And for me, that still just sticks with me today and has shaped my character on how I parent my own kids, but also how I make decisions moving forward. So, it's just one of those sentimental moments that I thought would be good for tonight. So thank you.
Let's give Alicia another big round of applause. Oh my goodness. Well, there is a sign-up sheet over here for people who are interested in doing this in the future. The way we call it Yarn Factory listeners, because it's mainly about you, the people who come and are so attentive. But we want people who be our listeners to be the ones who are up here. So hang out for a little while. They're ready to serve you some beverages, and we're ready to just tell stories in smaller groups. We'll do this again the second Tuesday of next month. And thank you so much for being here. And again, thanks for taking some time to just stop and listen to each other.
I was also a trumpet player in junior high and high school. So I was like, go trumpet players. But that concludes the second installment of Yarn Factory listeners here on Kankakee Podcast. Please join us if you like what you hear. There's nothing like being in the room when these stories are actually told live. There's something about the energy in the room. It's very positive. It's very uplifting. It's very entertaining. It's sad. It's happy. It's sometimes romantic in a way. There's just so many feelings in the room, and I think you'll get addicted to that positive energy. So if you can, join us for the next one, if you happen to be hearing this before then. The next Yarn Factory listeners session will be Tuesday, June 11th at Flanagan's Irish Pub in the basement of the Majestic in downtown Kankakee on Schuyler Avenue. Starts at 7 p.m. It's absolutely free. Does not cost anything to attend. And you can follow Yarn Factory listeners on Facebook if you want to stay up to date. Also, just the Kankakee Podcast social media pages as well, and to stay up to date on everything that's happening with Yarn Factory listeners. Want to give a special thank you, of course, to Flanagan's Irish Pub, the Kankakee Public Library, the Daily Journal, Skylar Brinkman, and to Bill Yohnka, of course, for putting this together. And can't wait for the next installment as well. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Kankakee Podcast. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Stephanie Vanderweide for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, Akubalan History Center, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.